It may not be Trae Young who's going to be the point guard for the San Antonio Spurs, but another young Eastern Conference point guard. Darius Garland is now the talk of the town for the San Antonio Spurs after a tweet from Jake Wingbach this morning. I probably butchered that name, but the Spurs seem to have legitimate interest in Cavaliers point guard Darius Garland from what league circles are anticipating. If Garland is made available, Cleveland could be interested in collecting Keldon Johnson, a rising prospect like Malachi Branham, and draft picks from San Antonio. This potential fit may almost be better than the whole Trae Young situation. Trae Young is still my top available option, but I think that this Darius Garland trade is none to sleep on without a shadow of a doubt, because Garland is a very talented point guard, and not many people are talking about him ever since Donovan Mitchell made his way to Cleveland, because that point guard, shooting guard combo, it just hasn't worked. Garland was an all-star caliber player. He made an all-star team in 2021, and since Mitchell has arrived there, his role has diminished, and Garland is someone who needs the ball in his hands to be good, to score, to create buckets for other teammates, because he did that. Before Mitchell got there, Garland was one of the best passers in the league, and it was established because he finished 7th in total assists in 2021 and 2022, and he did it again the following year in 2022-2023, and here's the thing. Jarrett Allen was a very big reason for that, because in those 2 years, he finished 4th and 6th in dunks those seasons. If Garland was able to create so much points off assists with Jarrett Allen, imagine what he's going to do with a 7'5" alien in Victor Wembanyama. I really like this Darius Garland potential idea, and I made a mock trade for it, and as you see here, I'm sending Keldon Johnson and Malachi Branham and the number 8th pick straight up for Darius Garland, because there's a lot of prospects at 8. I mean, this is obviously one of the weakest drafts in a long time, but there's still going to be good players at 8. I know Stephon Castle could be there, but this lets them dump off Keldon Johnson, who hasn't really established his role, struggles to identify with what he does on the court, and has struggled this season to consistently shoot the basketball. It sends him to Cleveland because Keldon needs a fresh start as well, and Malachi Branham, who is genuinely hit or miss. You never know if he's going to go for 20 or if he's going to go for 3. There's no given of these two players. They're either going to be good or they're going to be bad, but there's still so much young talent and raw potential in these two players. And then you give up the number 8 pick to Cleveland. The salaries don't really match up, but San Antonio will have cap space to take on. They're going to have $21 million going into the offseason, which gives them some spending room, still not as much as you'd like. But if you don't want Trae Young because of his salary, then you don't want Darius Garland because of his salary. They're almost identical. Darius Garland's salary over the next 4 years of his guaranteed contract, $36.7 million, $39.4 million, $42.1 million, and then $44.8 million. So that's from 2024, 2025 to 2027, 2028. And then for Trae Young's contract, he's making $43 million this upcoming season, $45 million in 2025, 2026, and then $48.9 million in 2026, 2027. So the salaries, like I said, if you don't want Trae Young because of his contract, then you most likely aren't going to want Darius Garland because of his contract. They're almost similar, not exact, but they're similar. People forget what Garland can do. I mentioned that earlier. He's always been someone who's been a league average scorer, especially from beyond the arc. This season, the league average was 36.6. Garland finished with 35.5, and for his career, he's shot above league average at 38.6%. So this is a guy who's going to be able to score in a variety of ways. He's shooting about league average from every spot. He loves the left corner, 45.8%, and can score from around the interior, around the free throw line or the blocks. 61.5% from the right block, 52.7% from the circle, and then 50% from the left block. So you're talking about a guy who could really go get you buckets anywhere. He kind of does exactly what Trae Young does. He could score in a variety of ways. He could score a three-pointer. He could go get you a floater. He can run the pick and roll. And that's something that I really like, is that he's familiar with this concept. He didn't do a lot of it last season with Donovan Mitchell doing most of that workload. But when you get Darius Garland, you get a guy who's played with Evan Mobley and, as I mentioned earlier, Jarrett Allen, and you've seen what he can do with them, so imagine what he'll do with these guys. People say that his weakest ability is his size. He is undersized like most of the point guards the Spurs might be eyeing right now. He's 6'1". But defense, you see him give a little bit more effort than what Trae Young does. But here's the thing. I am not worried about Darius Garland's ability to defend because most likely in any given situation where the Spurs are going to be playing an elite point guard, Jeremy Sohan will have that matchup. I think he has the ability to be one of the best perimeter defenders going into next season. And worst case scenario, even if Jeremy Sohan gets blown by, guess who's under the hoop? Victor Wembanyama. The guy who got robbed of depoy this last season and might win 5 straight. Who knows how many he's going to win. I'm not worried about the ability for a guard to defend when they have one of the best potential perimeter defenders and then Victor Wembanyama underneath the hoop. I'm truly not going to be worried about that side of the floor. The Cavs need to break up this team. They gave up a lot to get Donovan Mitchell. It was like Lauri Markkanen, Colin Sexton, Ochai Agbaji, and then I think it was a combination of 5 picks. This tandem of Garland and Mitchell hasn't worked, so it's time for them to break it up, and it's time for Darius Garland to get a fresh start and play with Wembanyama. So what is holding them back? Nothing. The Spurs still have all the assets and the ability to go make a big-time trade unless they choose not to, where if they want to go through the draft route and get someone like a Rob Dillingham or a Nikola Topic or a Stephon Castle, who I think could be potentially there at that 8th pick, and I'm not really high on his offensive game, one of the best perimeter defenders coming out of the draft class, but a very undeveloped scorer and a passer. So this is why I'm so high on trading for a point guard, because this draft class isn't very good. Wembanyama is ready to win now. No one expected him to be as good as he was in year 1, and while his contract is cheap, it's time to build the best team around him possible, and that's what they can do by trading for Darius Garland. You get rid of Keldon Johnson, who hasn't found a consistent role, and then you bring on a point guard who has shown so much potential, who has been a terrific playmaker, a terrific passer, and then you pair him up with this young squad. And then, don't forget, the Spurs still have the 4th overall pick. And in my opinion, if they trade for Darius Garland, then I think at number 4, you got to get a guy like Ron Holland. I talked about him in one of my previous videos. I think he has the highest ceiling in this draft. Literally a baby Kawhi Leonard. So imagine a starting 5 of Darius Garland, Devin Vassell, Ron Holland, Jeremy Sohan, and Victor Wembanyama. That's a squad that can win you some games, but obviously the depth is still the biggest issue. But that means Trey Jones has come off the bench, who's making about $9 million, $10 million a year, which is good because this puts Trey Jones in a position to be a key backup point guard, because he is not a point guard of the future. He's not someone who's going to be able to generate a lot of points by, shiftiness, by creating space, by step back jumpers, or really shooting the three-pointer. This was his best season shooting the three-pointer, and he's a spot-up shooter. You're not going to see him do a lot of shiftiness, a lot of big moves in order to shake off defenders and score buckets. That's what you get with Darius Garland, who may be one of the shiftiest, deadliest players with the ball in his hands. He knows how to shake defenders off or draw opposing defenders and kick out for opposing shots, whether it's maybe a Devin Vassell three-pointer or a Chetty Osman three-pointer, who I hope he stays around because he has some chemistry with them too. But the Spurs also need 3-and-D wings, or they also just need shooters to come off the bench because this bench is not good at all. But if they can go ahead and get a star point guard who is locked up under contract for the next 4 years, then they can take some spending money that they have, because they also have a lot of expiring contracts that is going to free up some cap space, and then they can go get people in the free agent market, which then is just about forming the best team around Victor Wembanyama possible. It really is. Once the Spurs get Garland, maybe they can decide for themselves, hey, now it's time to go get some talent and go all in. Maybe they can go snag Malik Monk from the Kings. Maybe not likely, but not impossible. Or they go get someone like a Gary Trent Jr., who's on an unrestricted free agency this summer, who made $17 million last season. Maybe give him, $8 million or something. Just see. This is the free agency where there is going to be like those role players that you want to have on your team going down the stretch, because the Spurs don't have that. They have Trey Jones, That's really about it. I love Sandro Mamukelashvili. I know some of you who don't watch the Spurs don't know who that is, but if you remember Boris Diaw back in the 2014 season when the Spurs traded for him, think of Boris Diaw but on steroids. That's what I see whenever I watch Sandro Mamukelashvili. And don't forget, Charles Bassey is also a very underrated player. He tore his ACL last season, but he was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. Very physical, very good to box out and just grab rebounds, and that's something the Spurs were really missing last season because Zach Collins isn't it. Maybe coming October before the trade deadline, they ship off Zach Collins' contract because I think he's making somewhere between 16 and 19 million. Maybe they just dump it, and so they can spend more money on upcoming free agents. But Darius Garland just opens up so many opportunities, and you're going to get him at a cheaper cost than what the Hawks want. I talked about potentially sending back the Hawks picks that they acquired in the DeJounte Murray trade. You don't even have to do that here. The Cavs don't need to go into rebuild mode. They need to choose between Mitchell or Garland, and if I'm the GM, I'm choosing Donovan Mitchell every day that ends in Y. We know how elite he can be, and we know that these two haven't been able to coexist, so I'm getting whatever I can for Garland. I'm getting a young player in Keldon Johnson, getting a young player in Malachi Branham, and then the 8th overall pick. You're giving up 3 role players for a guy who could come in and get 22 and 7 assists a night. The Spurs don't have that. They don't have an electric playmaker. They don't have an electric scorer. I get it. Trae Young is my favorite point guard of the bunch, but Darius Garland is definitely my number 2 option. So that's what the Spurs need to do. They need to capitalize when they have the ability to go get someone, and the Spurs might be interested for all we know. That's what I'm hearing more over Trae Young, and if that's the case, that's completely fine with me. We're just about time to reach the NBA Finals, so once that's over, trades can happen, and if the Spurs are going to get Darius Garland, it's going to happen before the draft so that they can give up the 8th pick, and that's going to be perfectly fine with me. I would love getting Darius Garland on this team. I think he is a bright young star. He's still 24 years old. He's locked up under contract, and the Spurs and him and Wembanyama, I think that's just a match made in heaven. He gets a fresh start where he can be the go-to point guard ball handler because that's where he thrives the most. And when that trade, if it happens, really hope when, but if that trade happens, I will be covering it here on Tide Talk Sports. So if you're not subscribed, go down below and hit that button, like the video if you enjoyed it, hit that post notification bell so you never miss when I upload a video here on Tide Talk Sports. And until next time, I'm signing off and I will see you guys later.